It's not a hot take because it's starting to become the most logical one, I guess. It's starting to become the most popular take heading into the 2024 college football season, which I'm going to tell you right now is going to get here a lot faster than you think it will. The popular take right now is that Georgia's the favorite to win it all in 2024. It's what the betting odds tell us. It's what the experts tell us. It's what I'm telling you. I think Georgia should be the favorite to win. I think that the transfer portal, this latest recruiting cycle, everything that's happened since the offseason has shaken things up a bit, but I still feel good about Georgia being the top team going into this next season, going into a new season of college football, a new phase. I keep calling it a new phase. This is we haven't seen some of this before, right? What are some of these teams going to look like in the Big Ten? The SEC expanded, different TV network deals. You're going to see really good games throughout the week. Reece Davis, his opinion is the same. He thinks that Georgia is a favorite heading into it. Pete Thamel thinks the favorite heading into it. I'm sure over the course of the next few months, we'll see over and over people naming Georgia their favorite. I think Ohio State will become a more popular name as the offseason goes on too. But back to Reece Davis, and that was kind of the point, him making that comment. Just agreeing with Pete Thamel on his podcast. Pete Thamel saying, I'm going with Georgia. I give them the edge. And Reece Davis agrees in terms of who's got the best chance next season. I remember last offseason, I believe it was Reece Davis that made a comment about Georgia saying, well, hold on. Georgia's not necessarily my number one. We have to see what the deal is with Carson Beck. And there was some truth to that. And there was a learning curve at the beginning of the year for Carson Beck and the Georgia offense, right? Getting reacclimated. He hadn't started in a few years, right? And Georgia's offense and Georgia's team really was banged up, especially they were banged up all year. I think it's hard. You'd rather be banged up right in the middle, almost. You don't want to be banged up at the beginning when you're trying to figure things out, figure out who you are. You don't want to be banged up at the end when things are starting to get a little bit more important and there's a lot more riding on some of these games. So that was a problem with Georgia. And Reece Davis, he got it right with Michigan. He thought that they were the favorite, I believe, heading into last season. Michigan goes perfect, right? Now only a handful of teams have gone 15-0. I don't know how good that Michigan team was compared to some of the other teams that have gone undefeated in the college football playoff era. The 2019 LSU team was obviously electric in a lot of ways. I feel the same way about the 2020 Bama team, right? Obviously didn't go 15-0 because it didn't play as many games, but that 2020 Bama team was pretty ridiculous. Georgia in 2022, right? Last season, Georgia goes 15-0. Really, really good Georgia team. I don't know. Actually, it'd be tough to rank that. I don't know where I'd put Georgia because I do think that 2019 LSU and 2020 Bama, those teams are really good. But Reece was right about Michigan. Ryan Curley from Dawg here talking about, looking ahead to next season. We're going to be doing a lot of looking ahead in the off season. Make sure you're checking out our newsletter. Link is down below. We got written content on the website as well that we're pushing out to you. If you give us your email address in the description down below through that link, you're getting 5-star content in your inbox every single day, or at least alerting you for it, because it's not all just here, right? We got it on the site as well. Look, the people in the know are people in the know for a reason, and he foresaw that Michigan had the physicality, they had enough returning, they had good enough coaching. There were a lot of distractions for Michigan, and whether you feel that they are the rightful champion or they shouldn't have even been there in the first place, they won the national championship, and that's going to be attached to them from now on. Heading into this year, there's a lot we don't know. Right? It feels like there's a lot less we know. This is an off season where we don't know a lot compared to really any off season. We don't know how good the 12-team playoff or bad it's going to be. Right? We don't know what the product's going to be like. Is it going to be a disaster? Is the window too tight? Is it just going to be? I mean, think about. The recruiting window is during that whole playoff period, and I know that those coaches that are in those playoffs are not going to enjoy the fact that they have to do a little bit of recruiting on the side too, and they can't really focus on that. Now, the recruiting will do itself a little bit if you're a playoff team and you're winning games like that. Yes, and I think that's been a little bit of the case for Georgia. As hard as the Georgia staff goes after players and is out there just hunting for talent, I think that those few weeks are really important. It's something that Georgia really took advantage of big time this past year. Going to the Orange Bowl, not having as significant of a battle sitting in front of it as it did the previous 2 seasons. They go out there and recruit a little bit harder. So I think that's something that'll be different heading into this next season. The fact that the conferences are different, right? Texas and Oklahoma adds a wrinkle to the SEC. Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA, they add a wrinkle to the Big Ten. If I had to sit here and predict right now, I think the Big Ten championship will come down to Ohio State and Oregon. I think the SEC championship will come down to Georgia and Texas. Those are statements that you couldn't have said a few months ago, right? Those are statements that didn't apply to this past season. There is no Pac-12, right? The Big 12 conference and the ACC we view as weaker, right? They will probably have a good team in them. You probably lean towards the ACC more when you look at a Florida State or a Clemson. Can one of those teams, break through and look really, really solid again? Obviously, they've both done that in the past. But then you look at the Big 12 and it's like, I don't know that any of these teams are real championship contenders, yet one of them is going to get an auto bid in the top 4. So things are different. There is an element of free agency to college football right now. So why is Ohio State climbing the ranks? They took advantage of that big time. Adding a Quinshon Judkins, adding Will Howard, adding Caleb Downs. They added some legit talent in the transfer portal. And you look at them and it's like, ooh, on paper, they might be the favorite. So why isn't it Ohio State? Why isn't Reece Davis just talking about Ohio State? Why is it Georgia? Well, for the very same reason that he said last summer, and it's about Carson Beck. Because when you look on paper, both the Georgia, the Ohio State, the Oregons, the Texas, those teams are all pretty similar. And you can definitely argue that from a raw talent standpoint, that Georgia probably is the best top to bottom. And you talk about depth as well, not just the starters. I look at it and I probably lean towards the Georgia Bulldogs in terms of who's got the best chance. But then you look at Ohio State's starting lineup and some of what they're going to have. But guess what? They don't have a returning starter. Will Howard obviously played in the Big 12, and he was able to do good things there. Wasn't elite, but he hasn't been in that Ohio State system. He hasn't been doing it with them. And I think if you look at the track record of transfer quarterbacks, especially the ones that end up being really successful, it's not like the one-year wonder type of transfers, right? It's the guys that stuck around for another season that end up playing really well. 3 pop into my head within the last 5 years as examples: Joe Burrow, Jayden Daniels, and Michael Penix Jr. Guess what? Heisman finalist in year 2 after transferring. So Will Howard, he may very well be really good when he gets to Ohio State, and they might be good immediately. And I expect them to compete for a national title. This is a team that should be competing to be in that Final Four, be in that top 4 and in that Final Four, competing to win a playoff game or 2 or 3, right? So that's one of the teams that should do that. But you look at Georgia, and I do think that they're the best. Obviously, you lose a Brock Bowers, you lose Ladd McConkey. I think offensively they're replenished. I look more on the defense, and there's going to be some younger pieces to the defense, some older pieces, some new pieces. It's going to take spring ball, really, for me to have a more developed opinion about this defense. And I think I've hinted at that a few times. For some of these things, I want to wait until the spring when we kind of get to practice. We get to see a little bit, hear a little bit from some of the players. That'll get me a way, way better pulse on what's going on with Georgia. What's going on with Georgia's secondary, defensive line. Questions that I have, how are they going to do this thing? Because offensively, I'm not as concerned about Georgia offensively. Part of that is because of a returning guy like Carson Beck. But a lot of what I've just talked about in these last few minutes here, especially in the last 3 or 4 minutes, are the reasons why experts, guys that work for huge networks, Reece Davis, Pete Thamel, are taking the Georgia Bulldogs heading into next season. Link is down below for the newsletter. Appreciate you watching.